Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Metaphysical podcast for part 2 of our discussion on harmonics and frequencies, where we'll be diving into the amazing spiritual and metaphysical side of electricity and sound. Did you know that scientists in the 90s were already warning people about the weaponization of sound waves? Did you know that certain technologies are already using strange phenomena for weird purposes today? Well, join remote viewer John Vivanco and me, investigative researcher Rob Counts, for a show that's out of this world. And hey, if you're watching us on podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating and review. And if you're watching us on a video platform, please like and subscribe to the Metaphysical show so you never miss an episode. John, how are you?
Good. Doing well.
Welcome back for part 2.
Part 2. Yeah.
It was pretty interesting, actually. Got into a lot of stuff.
I want to remind people that what we do here on this podcast is we do sort of a train of thought, conversational type format and not scripted. We don't have basically cues that we're following. We're just like, it's like the phone calls that Rob and I have. That's really what it is. You know, if you're ever talking to a friend, you're talking about a lot of different things, you just jump all over the place. So this is what it's about here.
And, just to tack onto that, if there is something you want us to focus on and you really want to hear more about, leave us a comment and we'll actually end up probably doing an entire show just about that or peripheral things around that subject. So we're happy to get into that. We're just broadly covering a lot of things at the beginning of this podcast and we can dig in more later.
I mean, each thing, like if you go back to the previous episode, we could take just one little thing and just dive really deep into that, and we're going to have to do that. We're just shotgunning it, I guess.
Yeah, it's exactly like our phone calls, to be honest. I can, it's pretty awesome. There's a lot that we got into last episode. We were talking about piezoelectric charges. We were talking about a little bit about the Montauk project, just because so much around that project revolved around sound frequencies. And we ended up getting into HAARP a little bit. And I thought maybe it was going to take a little bit too much time in that episode. So I waited. But there's a few things that I wanted to kind of bring up about these extremely low frequency waves that I think it's worth getting into a discussion about. And the first is, have you ever heard of Dr. Patrick Flanagan?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, so Dr. Patrick Flanagan is an electromagnetic specialist, and he's a Nobel Prize nominee. He was actually a child prodigy in electronics. And in this 1998 episode of Phenomenon: The Lost Archives, there was a episode just about HAARP. And what Dr. Flanagan said blew my mind, because this was 1998, and what I realized is in 1998, physicists and scientists were a lot more actively talking about the dangers of science than they are now. You don't hear any of it now. And what this guy said blew my mind. This was 1998. Okay, we're going to pull up a clip. And actually, I'm not sure. Is this the clip that I recorded? Okay, this is my clip. I recorded it off of the TV. The sound's a little bit shoddy, but you can watch the closed captions on here. Lindsay's pulling it up right now. And
I was considered a child prodigy in electronics. My entire life has been devoted to the study of the effects of electromagnetic energies on the human mind. When I was 13 years old, I invented a device that transmits sound to the human brain using electromagnetic waves. So this is my field. I've been studying this field for over 40 years. And HAARP scares me because I know what it can do. I know that HAARP can be used to control the human mind.
Point blank.
Yeah.
1998, people.
Right. Yeah, you don't hear this stuff anymore. I mean, you just don't.
I mean, what age would you say Dr. Flanagan was in that clip? He was probably in his mid-40s.
Something like that.
Maybe late 40s. And he's talking about at the age of 13, him developing a device that can actually create waves that can put sound in the human mind?
Well, I mean, the microwave pulsed audiograms is a thing. I mean, that is something that has been developed, where you can pulse voices into somebody's head with that. But I think there are many different ways. And I know that, the microwave pulsed audiogram type of technology has been used in the whole MK Ultra side in general. So, I mean, he's not wrong. I mean, this guy knows what he's talking about. So this stuff you don't find anymore. You don't hear about this stuff anymore.
But what's so curious about this is, if I was to just say this, right? And I'm not Dr. Patrick Flanagan. If I was just to say what he said out loud, I would be called a conspiracy theorist and I would be thrown under a bus.
Right, because that is
But it's true.
It is true, right? It's absolutely true. But I mean, people are being trained right now to deny everything that is outside of what people are told to think. I mean, that's another form of brainwashing, really. It's another form of MK Ultra, ultimately. So if people don't want to know about this stuff, either don't want to know that it's true or not. Ultimately, they don't want to understand how this stuff has been developed, because they want to trust. They just want to trust that they're going to be okay, that they're not having bad things done to them.
Okay, I understand that. But what I don't understand is, this is not that hard to find. This information, that this technology exists, not that hard to find. Yet, if you bring it up, you're ridiculed into like, oh, they don't have that, we would know about that. What's crazy, we're talking about a 13-year-old boy developing that technology using waves that our phones can emit right now, or that technology around us can emit right now. We're not talking about necessarily like HARP. He's worried about HARP because he knows what these things can do using even lower technology than what HARP has developed, right?
Yeah. I mean, he might be talking about something like, what's that called? The Ground Wave Emergency Network, which it's GWEN, GWEN.
Yes.
Where it operates in this like 225 to 400 megahertz range, and they're waves that sit on top of the surface level of the land, and these antennas are placed 200 miles apart, and they can move energy through that overpopulation. It's sitting over us right now. They can move it underground and over the population. It's a military network of antennas.
No, what I heard is, when I was researching HARP, is that HARP connects into these, and that's how they spread along a much greater distance, is by using these GWENs with HARP
through resonance.
To distribute
sympathetic resonance, right? And the brain, our brains are going to synchronize. They're going to have sympathetic resonance with these energy waves. Our brains are really interesting because they will have a sympathetic resonance to low frequencies. They'll start to, get in line with low frequencies. They'll also start to get in line with predominant brainwave frequencies within groups. And I've seen this before in remote viewing courses. Like when I'm doing live courses, my brain is typically in an alpha state because of all the meditation and remote viewing that I've done. I'm typically in an alpha state. And what I've noticed during classes is that begins to act as a resonator, where everybody else's brain starts to like work on that level, and they remote view much, much better. It's like a psychic pump.
Oh, wow.
Right. And so
it's like the energy field.
It's the energy field of it. Right.
Wow.
I mean, Dr. Puharich even spoke about how he saw a clairvoyant healer, like moving their brainwave state into the 8 hertz range, and then projecting that out into another person. And they start to move into the 8 hertz range, and then they use that frequency to somehow heal them. So it's really, it can be really, really useful or really, really damaging.
Sure. I mean, as is everything.
Yeah. And the whole intent by these organizations is to control people. Control people. How do you control people?
Well,
Because it's scary to them to have people that they can't control.
Yeah, and I understand that, but it's strange that, okay, we're talking about Dr. Flanagan here.
Right.
And he's basically corroborating the conspiracy theory of the Sage radar being used at Montauk, because it was the conspiracy revolves around, or allegedly they were using this old World War I or whatever, World War II Sage radar to beam frequencies that were changing and controlling things and experimenting with that. And
right. I mean, he's verifying the stories that was coming out of the population at Montauk in that general area of the aberrant behavior of the teenagers. He's literally verifying.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy.
And it's also weird that people don't put this together. I find that strange. Or are they afraid to? Maybe they're afraid to.
I mean, I think there's just been this huge push lately to negate the conspiracy theory side. Huge push lately. And I think really that's what it's coming down to. People in society have to stick together in order to feel good about themselves and to be able to survive. So you want to get on the bandwagon of what your friends are thinking, what your friends are doing ultimately. And that's really, I think, all it comes down to, because there's plenty of evidence as well as circumstantial evidence that can lead you to the truth of these things instead of just going on fact check websites.
Okay, so before we get off of the Dr. Flanagan subject, we mentioned the voice of God technology. The voice of God technology was allegedly, Lindsay, correct me here if I'm wrong, this was technology that was being used in some of the wars to actually beam a voice into the opponent's minds, telling them basically to stand down or worse, worse things. And that is largely a conspiracy that this type of technology exists. But if Dr. Patrick Flanagan is creating that when he's 13 years old, we don't know how that was appropriated anywhere else or on the battlefield and whether it was used or not. Right.
There was this one time. So back after remote viewing was declassified, I was working in a think tank, and this was a civilian think tank. We didn't have contracts with government. It was just like these backdoor kind of deals that would happen with intelligence, and we would work with business and stuff like that. And remote viewing was new to the public, and we were doing very well with it as a company, as a think tank. And at the same time that all this was happening, there was this like covert, like black ops group that was trying to shut us down. I mean, this is stuff that people don't necessarily believe happens, but this kind of stuff happens because they wanted to control the remote viewing field, and we were like a wild card, couldn't control us because we were civilians that had developed a company and had a shit ton of funding. And so we would get death threats. We'd get, like, the phone would ring and a voice on the other side would just say, stop what you're doing or we're going to kill you. Or you'd be talking to your friend on the phone and then a voice would cut in and say, stop what you're doing or we're going to kill you. Like that kind of stuff. So whenever we received these death threats, I would get together with my partner in the company. We go to a location to discuss it and try and figure out what to do, because it was always kind of scary. So one time we met up to figure out what we're going to do about it. And as we're sitting there talking about it, we both at the exact same time had this very strange feeling begin, like, in our feet. It felt like evil was crawling up under our skin. It was like a physical feeling where it went up our whole body, and our fear, fight, or flight response got triggered, like boom, like you wouldn't believe. So that moment was what I attributed as remote influencing, because we would be remote influenced. But I've never felt it that strong before. We didn't hear voices in our head. It wasn't like this voice to skull technology. We didn't hear voices in our head. I swear there was some kind of device being used to a psychotronic weapon to push our body into a fight or flight state in order to get us to basically shut everything down at that moment, to add on top of the death threat that immense fear. I mean, it was palpable. It felt like something was moving through your body that was pure evil to trigger the fight or flight response. So I feel like at that moment in time, I was probably hit with some type of psychotronic weapon. No voices, though. Didn't hear voices.
So back when I first started Edge of Wonder, our first interview was with a very curious guy. His name was James Scott. And anybody out there, if you have access to rise.tv, you can actually watch this interview. James Scott is like a cybersecurity specialist. It's sort of like a hired gun for these things, in a way where, he's got his own company and different government organizations will hire him. Okay. And this was in 2018 that we interviewed him. I think it was March 2018. And he was describing to us the use of phone and transmitting frequencies that can actually alter your body, make you sick, move your arm, like move your body in different ways using a phone. Like, this is what they're talking about in his circles in 2018, the use of phones for these purposes. And then he was also talking about payloads whereby you get an app. There's an app, and the app is going to be, everybody has automatic downloads on their phones. The app has another outside organization will infiltrate the update. They'll put in a payload, which is a series of code. The code gets downloaded onto your app, and now they've got full control over your app and the functions of your app to emit frequencies that can do these things.
This is exactly what I was pointing out in the last episode. With these news articles. So back, like what I was saying, a 2008-ish timeframe, these studies were done that the frequency of the cell signal will disrupt your sleep. They don't talk about that now in articles, right? They talk about only the blue light, because I think what they want you to do is just put the phone off to the side. Don't look at it, leave it on, put it off to the side, because that's what's going on. That's where I was going. That's what I think is going on with the phones these days.
Now the other side of I'm going to get into something else here that's pretty interesting, actually. The other side of the high frequency waves that we've been talking about are these extremely low frequency waves, right?
Right.
Have you met, I believe you've met him, but have you ever met and or talked to Brooks Agnew?
Have I met him?
Yeah.
No, I don't think
I met Brooks Agnew at a conference.
Did I meet him?
You probably, we weren't, I don't think you were at this conference. This was in Pine Top in Arizona.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay.
All right. Now, Brooks Agnew is a very interesting guy. He's a PhD, and he's an earth tomographer and physicist. All right. Now, this is going to shock you because of how long ago this was, but in 1983, okay, he did radio tomography with 30 watts, just 30 watts, looking for oil in the ground. He found 26 oil wells over a 9-state area, and 100% of the time it was accurate with just 30 watts of power beaming straight into solid rock.
Wow. Wow.
Now, HARP can blast high frequency waves up and create low frequency waves coming down that can go deep into the earth and find things like oil, like gold, like
Lost civilizations,
like parts of
mummies,
the earth that are
giant mummies,
like Mothman. No, I'm just kidding.
Mothman.
Okay, so we're not
Seriously.
like, I think people are looking at HARP as if it's okay, it's high frequency, it can do all of this stuff, and for sure it can do a lot of things. But if we're thinking, like, we're talking about low frequency waves being able to go and penetrate into the ocean and find stuff that you couldn't normally find.
Right.
And we don't know how advanced this technology is.
Right.
Who's talking about low frequency waves out there? And all of this, the craziness around this, is we haven't even broken out of the electromagnetic discussion here. Like, this is all electromagnetics. This is all stuff Tesla was all about.
Right.
You can literally figure out most of anything that you need to do here on planet Earth using electromagnetics. We're saturated in electromagnetics.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what they're doing these days actually comes from Tesla. Comes from all of his research.
Totally agreed.
Yeah. Nobody
Totally.
else. I mean, and it's funny too, because it's like, you know, when Edison and you know, we use this piped electricity, and
AC.
when that was chosen over Tesla because they can meter it to make money,
Yes.
is when all of that other stuff went down into that deep black project hole, or sat idle, and then went into the deep black projects. It's really interesting to me how this happens. It happens quite a bit. Same with like orgone type energy as well. I mean, the forces of nature that get hidden from us is just mind-boggling.
It is. And you know, you can call like orgone, for instance, different things. Like the Chinese were calling it chi energy.
It's the same thing.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's considered pseudoscience, by the way.
It is considered pseudoscience.
It has like a history of thousands of years, and you know.
Well, you know, like Wilhelm Reich.
Yeah.
His whole orgone energy thing. He would construct these cabinets, and he would layer wool and steel wool, layers of wool and steel wool, which created an energy. And he found that in certain cases it could reduce tumors. In certain cases, and it was consistent. It was consistent on these certain cases that could reduce tumors. He got in so much trouble for that.
He got arrested, put away.
Yeah.
And you know what's weird too is like the guy was studying a lot of different stuff, like stuff he probably shouldn't have been studying too. Like in my opinion, not like he was studying orgasmic energy.
Well, like, that's where it comes from. Orgasmic, orgone. Yeah, that's where it comes from. He was a student of Freud's.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I mean, hey, guess what? Like 1930s or 40s was that? Something like that. Free love, 1930s. I don't know.
Amazing how close Freud's name is to the word fraud, and I'll leave it right there.
Yeah. You know, speaking of like magnetic, psychic type stuff, have you ever heard of, and you know, voice of God? Have you ever heard of the God helmet?
No.
So
Tell
the
me.
God helmet, that was I think Stanley Coren and Michael Persinger out of Laurentian University. They were both, I think Dr. Persinger, he was a doctor. I don't know about Coren. It was originally called the Coren helmet, but the media got hold of it and turned it into the God helmet.
Of course.
Basically, what this thing does is it pulses magnetic frequency into the brain that is taken from an EEG trace of exactly, there it is, a picture of it.
That's EEG, a really awesome,
right? It's like like 1970s motorcycle helmet.
Yeah, am I going to race a motorcycle or am I going to get blasted with God energy.
It-
Dark helmet.
So basically what it does is it pulses these EEG traces into specific areas of the brain in order to bring an experience of, it could be God, it could be Christ, it could be a powerful being or entity. It's the effect of perceiving or feeling a ghost. And so a lot of people would have that experience with this while those areas of the brain were triggered. Now, when you get to a guy named Todd Murphy, he was a peer of Dr. Persinger. He developed one for the consumer market called the Shakti helmet, or the Shiva.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, I actually have one.
Really?
And they actually use this sometimes in remote viewing, like Ingo Swann used it. And basically, it's a series of nodes. You can move these nodes around too, because they're like on Velcro. They go around your head. You can stimulate different areas of the brain. It's connected into the computer, because in your computer, you've got sound files. You've got EEG traces of, let's just say, the amygdala, for instance. Like, what is the frequency of the amygdala? They turn that into an audio file, and then they pulse that through these magnetic nodes on your brain as magnetic pulses, right? And so this stimulates those parts of your brain. So you get sort of like an overload of stimulation in that brain. Then you have an experience happen, something interesting happen. And in research, it was found that this can increase in telepathy. You can practice telepathy. You can practice remote viewing with this, and telepathy. It will increase that skill. I mean, I have one.
So wait, does the other person need to be wearing the helmet too to experience it? Or
No, not really? Necessarily. No, not necessarily. But the thing is that you have to practice while you're wearing it. You practice these techniques while you're wearing it. And so your brain starts getting accustomed to working that way, and with these signals, activating those specific
It's kind of like a training mechanism to be able to use it when you don't have the helmet on.
Right. It is like a training mechanism.
Sounds like the opening scene of Ghostbusters. Remember that scene?
What?
Bill Murray is like, they're wearing these things, and Bill Murray is like shocking the guy instead of the girl, and telling the girl how much more advanced she is psychically, or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
It's so funny how we relate back to movies as these historical campfire stories. Remember when Uncle Jones did this and that back in, oh my gosh.
Well, Dan Aykroyd could be on this show. I mean, he's weird enough to be on here.
Yeah, he could.
He's done a lot of this stuff, and he was in Ghostbusters.
Yeah, right. But this whole field is called neurotheology. The experience of the divine or religion in the brain, how the brain can create this or be the window for it. So it's a fascinating area, really fascinating area of study. So it's like these things, they can induce spiritual experiences. And some people claim that when they have used these, it's been such a profound experience, one of the more profound experiences that they've had in their lives. So not all this stuff is bad, right? I mean, you've got the voice of God technology, which sounds like it should be good. Ultimately, guys, it's like, how can they make something be so horrible that sounds so good? Voice of God, like, come on, right? And then you've got the God helmet, right? So you've got these two polar opposite things that produce these experiences, except they're using that other side for a really negative purpose,
Yeah, what other purpose to research and develop this technology if not to use it to control things? I mean, human beings don't have a very good track record with conducting research for anything other than personal gain.
Right.
So when, I think a lot of people, it's amazing how science has branded itself and positioned itself where it's like, for the good of humanity, and take all of the religion out of this. We'll make decisions based on reason. And it's like, what is that reason? Because you can tell a story using data any way you want. And
exactly. Yeah.
I don't believe it.
Right. And then if you question it, you become you're shamed as a science denier.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I think it's hard for folks who are really into science to really accept this when I say this, but the fact that science is structured precisely like a religion now.
Well, it is. I mean, I've said this before many times too.
Yeah.
But, it's...
They react the same way religious zealots do when you attack their principles.
Right, right. I mean, scientific process is scientific process. Yes. Okay, that's established. That's an important thing in an investigation in general. But,
you can take that to an extreme. It's like religion basically takes spirituality to an extreme, arguably, right, where, you can create these as religious zealots. Well, you can do the same thing with science. They become, scientific zealots, and then they're attacking people when they break out of whatever structures that they've tried to create or that they have manipulated, to be honest.
Right. I mean, 3D science is 3D science. It literally deals with the material world. And there are instruments that can't measure the things that people experience that are outside of what science deems as being valid, right?
Yeah, and it's strange too, because then you have like, okay, here we have science. We only deal with the 3D world. Also science, let's develop quantum computers which can go into other dimensions and get back information. And then you're like, excuse me, did you just hear what you just said?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what's funny is that this was like back when we had this one guy. I probably mentioned this before. This one guy that was this sort of intermediary with the think tank that helped us work in agencies, and he was part of an agency. He told me that they had this computer that was a quantum computer that could take snapshots of the future, right? And I mean, I just thought, yeah, you're full of it. I don't believe you. But then later on, you get all these reports that come out about the chronovisor and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. Now we're getting into
yeah, he said it was a quantum computer.
This is a Project Looking Glass here.
Right.
Really.
Right.
So that, yeah, this is a technology, allegedly alien technology that could basically see into the future. Is that accurate? I think that's accurate.
That's basically what it is. It works on the quantum level somehow. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it makes sense, because if you're looking at just like quantifiable algorithms that are predicting, various outcomes from the data that's being presented, I can see how that would work. I mean, that's what do you think Google is, really? I mean, like these social media applications that are just garnering terabytes of information from us on every second practically. We're looking at constant data being tracked, and then conceivable outcomes being spat out. I mean, I think actually, this Aladdin thing that they're using in finance, BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard use this thing called Aladdin, which is basically just a highly advanced algorithm that is literally controlling the finances of our world right now. And they're all using it.
Right.
And it is why our world is in the state it's in right now, to some extent, depending on, obviously there are other factors, but finance makes up a large part of what's going on right now, more than I think people give it credit for. And, and it's being controlled by these algorithms.
Right.
It's weird.
Yeah. Well, I know you find that in trading. Trading is all algorithmic based, and the big money is using these things, and the little person just gets hammered by it.
I don't know how we went from waves to...
I mean, okay, so like as far as remote viewing is concerned, with all of this stuff, with let's just say voice to God or voice of God technology or whatever, we've been more like the recipients on the other end
Right.
of receiving this stuff, not so much on the remote viewing side. We haven't like looked at a whole ton of stuff around this on the remote viewing side. What we've looked at predominantly is the more exciting things, because it's like you could spend forever dealing with the negatives of this world and the dark things and the horrible things when you get into the whole MK Ultra side and how they use frequencies to destroy people, basically. What we've done is try to understand how frequencies are able to excite piezoelectric charge, how they work with certain locations like Aramumuru in Peru in order to open up portals, and what are those frequencies. So this, like, I'm involved in this ongoing thing with remote viewing to try to understand what are the layers of frequencies and harmonics that are used for the situation of opening these doorways up. Because, as I said before too, they also use that kind of technology in Montauk, where they've got two different frequencies that are pushing together to create that doorway. And so a lot of these situations that deal with portals to dimensions or wherever have to do with harmonics, have to do with frequencies that are pulsing, moving together. And this is really what it comes down to. This is unified field theory, ultimately. And that is really like where my interest lies, on the side of frequencies, as opposed to how we know what they're doing to people. We know that our phones, we shouldn't be using these phones. We shouldn't have them next to us. We know all this stuff. I'd rather focus on the things that are more interesting and exciting.
Me too. I mean, and also, like, why? Like, we already know how much of a bag of cats this world is right now. It's like,
bag of cats.
Why not focus on the positive things,
right,
and how we can actually, like, what they call life hack or whatever? Because, why not? I mean, it's so easy to do something bad and wrong in this world, and it's so much harder to do something that's right or that's good. Like, that's just how it's set up. And it's like we've got to work towards that, Yeah,
I mean, that gets into the area of when you look at the amount of programming that happens here on this planet, I get a very bleak viewpoint. I mean, we are thought of somewhat as cattle, and those things to be used by someone else, something else. And our individual lives don't matter so much to them. They don't matter to them at all. It's just literally what they can get out of us. So it's a hard thing, and the more, look, living in that idea and always thinking about that kind of stuff is detrimental in general, and it's going to get a person nowhere.
Yeah.
It's really going to get a person nowhere. You have to get outside, put your feet on the ground, go into nature, get a different frequency running through your body.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah, get off of Twitter.
And get off of Twitter. Get off, like, put your technology away. Get off the internet. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of problems that I have with the way the planet's going at the moment, but nothing can touch our own spiritual development. There's no device, no nothing that can touch our own growth and spiritual development. And really, that's what we have to be focused on.
And part of me is like, it's this double-edged sword when you're talking about something like Twitter, because it's like, okay, yeah, there should be a town square where everyone can go in and talk, and hey, good for you, Elon, trying to open it up for more opinions on there so that people can talk. Fine. Okay. If you agree with me or not, that's what Twitter is. Right. But then, excuse me, the other side of it, though, is just constantly being dragged through all of that, always having to look at the good, the bad, the opinions, the whatever. And it's like, just like, what would happen if you just shut Hollywood off? Just shut it off. Like, we don't need it. They're probably some of the most out of touch people on the planet. You know, like it's impossible to watch the Grammys anymore or like the Oscars and listen to some of these people talk, and they're on a different planet. Like they don't even live here anymore, you know? And it's like, well, just if you just shut it off, honestly, like I really think based off of what you just said, if we were all working really hard on ourselves and developing our internal frequency, if you will,
Yeah.
and it was a higher vibe, it would push out much more of these things that are actually holding humankind back right now.
I
so
agree.
why not focus
Absolutely.
on ourselves? Why
Yeah.
not?
Yeah. I mean, think about like the pulse of the earth, the Schumann resonance is 7.83 hertz, I believe. Walk around outside barefoot, get rid of your technology, don't bring your phone with you. That changes your brainwaves, changes your brainwave state.
And this is proven. You're not even you're not making this up. This is a thing.
Right. Right. And this is really, really important for people to do, because all of these devices that we have around us all the time, and the Wi-Fi, I mean, 2.4 gigahertz constantly pulsing through our bodies. I mean, this is not a good situation. It's unhealthy for the body and the mind. We have to get outside of this stuff. We have to, and not be in it all the time.
Well, I'll tell you what, John, this has been a great episode. And after this episode, I'm going to take my shoes off and go walk outside in the grass, even though it's freezing cold where I am.
Yeah. Same here.
Yeah, John, thanks so much for hanging out. And this was a great conversation. And I just want to ask everyone at home, if there's something you want us to dig into here, please comment, whether you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Rumble, wherever you are. Comment below. Let us know what you'd like us to talk about and how you're liking the show so far. Give us some feedback. We'd love to hear from you guys. If you're on podcast, please leave us a rating and review. If you could take the time out to do that, we can reach more people that way if you love what we're doing. And definitely like and subscribe on YouTube. John, did you have anything to add with everyone?
No, just, I mean, shut your electronics off after this show. Shut them all down.
Except come back to watch Metaphysical because, you know,
turn it back on.
Nourish your mind as well. Yeah. All right. Well, John, thanks so much. And we'll see you guys soon.